also from maintenance. And we kind of work our way through there. If I could just linger a little bit on each of those. For the attendance, we're doing a district attendance summary, a 3-year comparison. We're looking at the attendance summary by grade. We have a much more detailed report that goes to the schools, and the principals can see that, and they can look at it for each of their buildings and each of the grade levels that are in there. Same thing is true with enrollment. We do that for the schools themselves. And portal usage, we're showing here portal usage by school and grade, but there's more detailed information in the school success summaries that the educational staff and schools use. High school, because we collect more data on high school, we have more data to show. So under high school, you'll have high school completers, which is the graduation, high school non-completers, those that didn't post-secondary plans, Regents results, AP results, PSAT, MMSQT, and then the achievement list. In the middle schools, we have the New York State test results, which are grades 3 through 8, and middle school, of course, is 6, 8. And then we include the achievement list, and in the elementary schools, we have the New York State testing programs, which is grades 3 through 5. So that's kind of where we go with most of those. Fiscal accountability, there's actually a newer report that's going to come out that Dr. Robinson, as the superintendent, has had to look at with Dr. Wood regarding the equity of funding within the school buildings themselves.
This is Chase, actually.
This is Chase, too. And so that when that becomes more available from a public perspective, we'll probably include that as part of our fiscal piece. For now, we'll use the ones that we've been using for a while, the fiscal accountability part. The financial data, general ed, financial data, special ed, and students with disability counts, that all comes from New York State. The first part of that, operating costs by school, that's the one where we have a homegrown formula that we use where we take the total amount of the budget and we allocate that out for each of the students, and then we break it down by the number of minutes in a day. So you literally can figure out how much it costs to run each of the buildings by the minute. And I always say that when I was a principal, it was an important thing. So if somebody wanted to do a field trip or to do a certain event, I'd always say, well, let's take a look at actually what we're spending here when we do that, in addition to the educational aspect of it. The athletic piece, we have our season summaries there. So we have fall, winter, and spring, all of last year. Transportation, we have the facts and figures that they provided to us, and again with facts and ops, the accomplishments, the work that they do, the size of the facilities that are here, the acreage, the square footage of our buildings. And then in food service, we have revenue, meals served, lunch trends, and free and reduced lunch information. And then we'll just kind of roll into some of the items in here. Again, the district summary, and I know the people in the back can't see it, but that's okay, because it's just the people up here right now that have to focus on this. So this is our 3-year comparison, and the red bar is the year just completed, and the green bar is 2 years ago, yellow's in the middle. So we make it a bit bigger, okay. All right, so you can see that September is our biggest month, highest percentage, 97.4%. Everybody comes to school in the month of September. It starts to go down a little bit. It dwindles in the colder months, and then it has a pickup as it comes back and heads into June. You'll see that they're all pretty much the same month, year. We also do the summary by grade level, so we give you all 12 grades, and you can see the percentages that are across there. We're fortunate in that our district has very good attendance at all of the grade levels for all of the months that are there. You can't say that for everyone, but for us, we actually can say that. Our enrollment numbers, we do this every month. They're actually called the attendance periods. We have 10 attendance periods, September through June. The green bar represents the students that are regular education. The little red bar are the students that are in special education. This, of course, is September through June of last year. When we start the dashboard for September of this year, the first month looks pretty paltry because it's just going to be September and then it's going to be kind of empty. But not all of these are updated each month. Some are updated quarterly, some are updated annually. So you can see there's our attendance figures there. Portal usage, this is the percentage of students per school who have a parent with a portal account. And you can see that that's kind of choppy, and it actually has become a little more choppy the last year or two. We were all hovering between the high 80s and the low 90s for a number of years, and it started to spread out a little bit. So that's information we'll share with folks so they can see that in the buildings where they are, because the electronic communication is obviously the fastest, and because it's the fastest, in some cases the most effective way to get information out. And the portal usage by grade level, and this is you can see here now, when you look at, of course, kindergarten is the lowest, and that's been that way for forever. But as you go up the line, you'll always see a spike in 6th grade. I think 6th grade has always been a spike every single year, increase in portal usage there, and then it basically stays at that 90% mark as we go all the way across through till the end. High school information. Just a word on here. Normally this comes from New York State report card. The 18-19 data is not out on the New York State report card, so the 18-19 data that we've placed here is from the state reports that we have to file. So they're not official until the state accepts them and places them in the report card, which will be sometime later this year. But you can see that our total completers in 18-19 was 782. And then you can see the breakdown for the numbers of diplomas and the types of diplomas that we have. Regents with honors, regents with advanced designation. By the way, I should probably mention the regents with honors, if you're noticing it's really not a large number. That used to be one of the great credentials that we had until we got a regents diploma with an advanced regents diploma with honors, which is the 8 exams. And so the regents with honors has become a standard that over time we probably won't issue much anymore, because most kids are going to get the advanced regents diploma with honors. So that's something that'll probably fade away. The regents with CTE endorsement, we're just starting to begin to percolate those through. We have a bunch of courses that Dr. Wood had worked on that got recognition by New York State, so that we'll probably see a perk up in those numbers for that diploma as we get towards next year's graduates.
Is that part of what we approved last year here? The new plan that recognized the business students,
Yeah, we discussed it, yes.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
But the state actually has to
The state has to approve the plans.
which they've done. Now the non-completers, I just want to make sure everybody understands that with the non-completers, the first 3 years you see up there where it says dropped out 12th grade, those are the cohort dropouts. In other words, those are the students that came in as freshmen and theoretically would have left as seniors. So that's the 7, the 9, and 11. The total non-completers grades 9 through 12, which would include those students in those numbers, plus any underclassmen. So that's kind of like your 4-year dropout rate versus your cohort dropout rate. So just so you know.
Do we count people that, kids that go through and advance out early, like 11th grade they can graduate, or do we count those?
Yes, they're just graduated at a different portion, so they wind up being counted at different times that we do it. Basically, the graduation cycle runs from January through into August.
Okay.
So that's kind of how you count them. And the state used to end it in June, and then probably 20 years ago they switched it to including the August grads as part of that. So a lot of the early grads you'll see most of those go in January, but once in a while you'll see them do a year early and get out in June. Post-secondary plans, and again, these are normally pulled off the state report card for 18-19, but these are off of our files that we send to the state, so they're not official. But you can see the last 2 years, the number of percent of students to a 4-year college has been at 67%, and the number of students to a 2-year college has gone from 21% 2 years ago to 22% this past year. And others on to post-secondary schools. These numbers, if you were to go back and look at these over a period of decades, the percentages are just very, very similar as a district. Yes, Gary?
The lower numbers in 14, 15, 16, are they more reflective of what was going on with the prospects for employment with college graduate.
Yeah, actually, if you remember when we talked about this back at that point, we had the economic crisis of 2009, and there was actually a reduction in percent of kids going for 4-year, and an increase in kids going for 2-year at that point in time. And it's interesting you pick that up, because I was looking at that again this afternoon, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's the tail end of the effects of the recession, at least based on the data that we've looked at over time. And the Regents results, the only thing I'll say to you about them is just remember that the ones that have the CC after them, which refers to Common Core, they actually have 5 levels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the other Regents exams which are above them, the living environment, the chemistry, the earth science, physics, global, and U.S. history and government, those exams up there are the ones that still have the traditional 4 levels. They were never haven't been moved forward yet, let's phrase it that way. Global studies is a unique animal in that the past year is the first time we have the 5th level, but there was a transitional year prior to the prior years, the transitional years from that point in time. AP exams, we provide a lot of data on this that comes really from the College Board. When you look at this, you can see that we have a good number of students taking these exams, and most importantly, you see that the students who get 3, 4s, and 5s, the percentages are slowly growing over those years, and that's a nice number to see, because the 3 or better is going to give them the possibility for an advanced placement, if not actual college credit, or both in some cases. So that's kind of a nice thing to see with that course. The AP results by individual exams, they're too numerous to show, but again, when you look at the fact that you have 889 tests given, and you look at the score that equals 3, score that equals 4, and score that equals 5, you're talking 200, another 300, 500, and another 250 or so there. Scores, and we look at a score 2, which is 91, and a score of 1, which is a 19, a relatively small percent of students that did not either get a score that would give them advanced placement or give them college credit, or both. Get my cursor on here. There we go. The PSAT NMSQT competition for National Merit Scholarship. I think you can see that we obviously don't have the official results for this year from it, because we're in it, but when you look back at 2018, there were actually 26 students. You had 9 semifinalists, 9 finalists, and then you had 2 overall winners, which is always nice to have. And again, that's just, some of that is just the makeup of the particular classes that are there. That's a little more difficult to judge the success on. And the achievement lists, I'm not going to go over them. You know what they are. The interesting thing is most kids get high achievement, and the smaller percentage of kids are on the achievement list, which I always thought was interesting. Shenendehowa was one of the first places I came to where I actually saw that phenomenon. Usually I had more kids on the achievement list versus the high achievement list, just the way they go. But here it's always been different. Middle schools, again, it's the state exams, and these, of course, we have the percentages there for the 18-19. The state has released those. They did so back in July. They released those scores, so you can see where our percents are in those things. You'll see some growth at some levels, depending on what the test is and where it's been. The general trend for our schools has been healthy and positive, and in the direction where we want to continue to see them go. But again, those are just large numbers. They're much more specific numbers, much more data-detailed ones that would go to principals, academic administrators, and then classroom teachers to look at it from an instructional perspective. And of course, middle school achievement lists. Again, same kind of a concept here. The high achievement list actually has the larger number of students on it. And elementary schools, we have on this dashboard, we just have the state exams, and you can see the state exams breakout scores there the way that they are. And it's the same trend here, that overall as a district, we're seeing growth in those areas and more kids getting into the score ranges that we're hoping for. This is again, the fiscal supplement. This is the local cook's view of how to spend your school dollars. Just again, a reminder, when you look across, if you look at orange and look across, the enrollment as of end of October was 654, so that's our standard. The cost for the year is about a little over almost $12 million. Cost per day is $64,949 a day. Cost per hour is $10,526, and then the cost per minute is $175. And again, the explanation of how we arrive at that is in there, and you can take a look at that. It's very easy for us to do. We've set it up on a spreadsheet, so every time you approve the budget and then the voters vote on it, we then just put the next one in and set it in. And again, it just kind of gives you a perspective for what it actually costs us. And again, there's many ways to divide it up. That's just one way, but I think it's a pretty interesting way to look at it. And we actually use it as a teaching tool. Several principals have used it with kids when we talk about instructional time. I've used it in some of the dealings that I've had with students when we talk about loss of time. For example, for a false alarm or something like that, what's the impact? Well, here's an example of what the impact is. And so this just shows you how you break down the days, roughly the number of hours the students are in school. The next piece is this is state information, and if you look at this 2016-17 information was released last May. Okay, so that was released almost a little over 3 years ago, okay, because that's how late they do that. So it is up to date. It's just that, the next one we'll give you is 17-18, probably in 2021. Special education information here. The state did a hiccup for a little bit and didn't put this out, and then they came back and rebounded and did it again. But I think it's particularly good to take a look at that when you look at the expenditures of our district and the expenditures of similar districts, and then you look at all of them in New York State, you can see that there's a very laser-like look at how money is allocated and how money is spent for all the students in the school district. And when you look at similar schools, just as an example, expenditures per pupil, $27,119 for our district. Similar school, $32,148, and that's just for a student. So again, this is kind of an interesting piece of data that the state puts out, and I hope they continue to do that because it's a nice way to look at it. And then this one, students with disabilities with student counts, they have not produced the data from a year ago yet. Usually we get that. We haven't gotten it, but we do have the prior 4 years here, and you can see the percent of students that are in the different settings, the percentages that are there for Shen, and the percentages that are there for New York State. And you can see that our settings tend to be more favorable the way we would like to see them for our students. Classification rate, again, New York State always looked at around 11%, and you can see Shen classification rates are in the 9 to 9.5% range, and most of the other districts in the state are well above what the state would recommend, which is 13%, 14%, actually up here to 15%. So there's some good information in there. Of course, these are documented well by sources outside the school district, but it's always good to put them in here anyway. And that is our athletic teams. Not only do you get to see where they were from a competitive perspective, you get the roster size, and then of course at the varsity level you get the scholar athlete indication. And Shenendehowa has now gotten to a point where this is clicking for virtually every team each of the seasons, which is really, really nice to have. Here's our winter season in here, and again you can see the place. Second, for example, boys alpine, second place, section 2, 20 students on the roster, scholar athlete recognition of 91.90. So there's just lots of good information in here because they are student athletes, and it's nice to have the student word in front of that. And then here's our spring sports from this past spring, and again, you can see where each of the teams finished, the number of students that are involved. I mean, the track and field is 500. That's kind of been that way for a number of years now. I mean, 500 kids on an athletic team, wonderful thing. And we don't have the data yet on the scholar athlete piece for that. Transportation, it's interesting because the budget usually changes. The bus fleet sometimes changes, I guess, depending upon whatever we bury as a bus, and then how many new ones we buy. But the number of students riding buses, and remember, it's not just students that attend the Shen schools, it's students that live in Shen districts that attend other schools that are there. And then the buses travel to 72 different school areas. Transportation employees are 270. The bus inspections per year, which are twice per bus. The DOT pass rate, which is virtually 100%. And then the driver training that Al and the others do to keep everybody up to where they need to be for our kids to get to school and home again safe. Facts and ops. And again, the numbers here always astound me. 353 acres. 353. That's a small park on the New York State level or even the national level. 232 acres are our main campus. 8 elementary schools, 4 on, 4 off. 8 playgrounds, 3 middle schools on campus, high school east and west on campus, the district office off campus, bus garage on, 18 buildings, 1 million, almost 1.5 million square feet of space, 52 playing fields, 20 miles of road and parking lot. That might actually be a little bit more, Dr. Robinson, since the roads are a little fatter than they were. So we might actually have a little more roadway space on there. Parking lots, and of course the aquatic center that we have as well. And then this is just a good look at the square footage for each of the buildings and that we have, and how some of those have changed over the years. This is our use of facilities from Community Ed, and they go back to 2012-13, and we don't have their 18-19 data yet, but we're up through 2017-18. And you can see that each year we're increasing the total number of events up to 28,446 at the end of 17-18 school year.
28,000 events?
Different events that occur. There's your events by months. I mean, it's almost unthinkable when you look at those numbers. They're huge. Factors that affect where the events are, of course, as you all know, if you've driven around campus, and you saw some reports last week, depends on construction, school programs, sports and activities. The non-reported events, daily school activities that are not put on building use forms, many Shen athletic team practices, casual school club, and team gatherings. And then food service, one of the best parts is always a good meal. So we are at a point here where the total revenue was $3.3 million last year. And there's a breakdown of the surplus food, federal reimbursement, state aid, reimbursable meals, and other food sales. And then the meals served, and our meals served, you can see September, October through June, breakfast, lunch, and the number of days that those were served each month for each of the years as we go through. You see last year just completed was 182 days, and 17-18 was 180 days where we actually served meals. And then we actually had two years in there that were 178 days of serving meals. And then this is the average number of breakfasts that were served. And you know, there's a nice, it just grows real nice. It drops a little bit in June, but it starts out a little low in September. It's just a nice growth factor as we go through each of those through each of the years. And of course, the vibrant royal blue is the color for the year just completed on here. And so that's one of our better Junes actually. And you know, Katie's been able to, for the most part, make these blue marks go past the other ones in most of the months that are there. Our lunch trends, this is the free, reduced, paid, and other. And you can see the breakdowns there. Obviously, the biggest chunk of what we have are the paid lunches. But if you take the reduced and the free and put those together, they come to close of each of the, about half of each of the paid lunches. And then the number of students that are eligible for free lunch and eligible for reduced lunch. And that number, we don't have the 18-19 stats for you yet. They'll be coming soon, but that number will more than likely increase. One of the reasons for that is there's a different system that the state uses for us to add students into the system, and we've accessed that system now, and Kitty's able to pull more students and more families into the free and reduced lunch program as a result of the ability of ease of getting on that list. And then the food service staffing, the clerical, the warehouse delivery, cook managers, the cooks, and the food service helpers all putting stuff together. And then information from HR, and this is some what we would call some basic educational data system information, or BEDS data, where we have the number of principals, number of assistant principals, and number of teachers and other professional staff that we've had. And you can see the level of consistency on some ends of it, and you can see some of the growth in some other areas. And that's that.
Any questions? Have a good day.
So what's this going to be on the link? I did see the link was updated on the website, but
Yes.
This is the website.
That is the website.
Oh, that is the website.
Yes.
Okay, because when I looked earlier, I didn't see all of it
Yeah.
that we just saw now.
Well, what I did is I cut some pages out that was emailed to you so that you didn't have like the ones that said high school and the ones that said middle school. I just ditched those pages.
Okay.
But this is the literal one. That's the link that the public can, or any one of us can use.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Yep.
So now we'll turn it over to Mr. DeLallo. He'll talk about the NISBA resolution overview.
Yep. Did everybody get that particular?
This, plus it was linked on the website.
I'm not actually going to use it, I just want to know that you have it.
Yeah.
It's on the link.
What I did was gave you a little bit of a summary. There were, I believe, 20 resolutions that were recommended by the Resolutions Committee. This is a special standing committee that looks at and evaluates all the resolutions that come in regardless of source. And they endorse or recommend certain ones, and they do not recommend others. And they always give a rationale for their determination. I will go through this, but I'm not going to go through 26 resolutions.
We appreciate
Fair
that.
enough.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, I figured you would. What I would like to do is perhaps a few more than I would necessarily like to deal with, but the ones that pop out, in other words, whether I agree with the Resolutions Committee or not, there are some resolutions I thought that had content that was significant enough to bring it to your attention. The other ones I think that I would like to discuss are the ones where I am at odds with what the Resolutions Committee said. They recommended, I didn't think that was a good idea, or they didn't recommend it, I thought it was. Because, I mean, I'm out of bounds, so to speak, and it's why. So the first, actually, one that I wanted to bring to your attention was not a resolution at all. It was a bylaws change. And a number of years ago, the director of the Black School Board Caucus was added to the board of directors. That took a couple of years of going back and forth among the members of the business meeting to do that. The reason why there was this reticence to do it was because the basis for membership on the board of directors the board of directors had always been based on geography. You know, in other words, a number of school districts that made up a district had a director, or the big 5 cities that were significant enough to stand alone and had unique issues, they got a director. But this was for a particular population, which was not done before. So there was a reluctance to break the mold, so to speak. But eventually it got passed, and I believe it's a good thing. Now, on the other hand, the Resolutions Committee did not implement that change, at least not until now. The Resolutions Committee was composed of simply people appointed by the director to be representatives of that particular area in the Resolutions Committee. Okay, I did that for 3 or 4 years a while back. Very interesting. And they're generally very good people. But this year, they're proposing that the bylaws be changed so that we will have representation by the director of, or not necessarily the director, but someone from the Black School Board Caucus. And I think this is something good. You know, we're talking about diversity. Well, unfortunately, school boards and the board of directors for the state organization does not accurately or represent well the populations that attend our schools. They're predominantly white in all of those instances. And how can we adequately represent everybody if the experience of individuals is completely off the board because they're not there to speak to it? So I think we need to have that kind of representation. So I support that.
I found this one confusing because I remember 2 years ago when it was approved in Lake Placid at that convention. So I didn't realize that a second one had to be, the bylaws had to be approved.
Yes.
Because it was approved. For the,
That was for the board of directors, but not the resolutions committee.
You have to approve those separately?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the bylaws addresses them separately. The resolutions committee is one of the few standing committees, not an ad hoc committee, but one that is constitutionally created and its functions are described within the Constitution. And so if it's in there, if you want to change it, you got to change the bylaws or the Constitution.
Do you see any other changes coming for this one? Or do you think this will be it for, as far as the representation for the Black Caucus members? So when it was approved 2 years ago, I thought that's it. We're going to see a resolution. So I didn't. That's what I'm saying. Is there anything else that we're not?
Only the board of directors.
A separate group has to approve it separately, other than the members.
The board of directors is
Okay.
one body. The resolutions committee was a dedicated group in terms of its function and separate. So we didn't pass a general resolution changing all the language in any place where there was representation.
Okay.
Only the board of directors.
Okay.
Now we're going back and catching the resolutions committee. Let's see. The next resolution that I starred here was actually Resolution 2. And it puts into a resolution form things that were designed to commit the organization to more diversity and inclusivity. I thought that was terrific because it reflects the fact that what this organization did last year is being embraced by NYSBA as an organization. The only thing that I regret is that the resolution, while it lists specific things, it does not talk about eradicating certain other things or addressing other things, such as structural racism, implicit bias, and white supremacy. It doesn't, it's mute on that. I think that's one of those things where Rome wasn't built in a day. It's only been 160 some odd years already since slavery came to an end in the United States, but Rome wasn't built in a day. All right, let's see. The fourth resolution, and by the way, these things, the language of the resolve is the same as that which appears in the resolutions book.
Right.
verbatim. The comments are mine. Comments are mine. Fourth resolution, I checked there. Oh, excuse me, it was not fourth, it's the fifth one. It said, shall create a task force to study the current requirements, costs, trends, and other aspects of special education system and make recommendations for the future delivery of special education in New York. And in so many words, I said, you know, examination of anything that is as important and represents such a large commitment of resources, just as it's justified to look at it and examine it from periodically. What I found, what I had a problem with, and it causes me to have some difficulty supporting the resolution, is the emphasis on cost rather than effectiveness or efficiency. The sixth resolution requires independent hearing officer on the 3020A hearings to accept the penalties sought by the district when there is a finding of guilty. Okay. 2038, I think you all know, has to do with dismissal of a tenured teacher or someone in a professional position within the school district. I don't find that to be as innocent as it might appear. I have a problem because I'm not necessarily not here, but I have witnessed it and I am aware of it. Sometimes when a school district has a marginally strong case relative to a particular charge being levied, I think that the redress or the penalty is perhaps not proportionate and appropriate. It's excessive, but it puts the district in a position to negotiate, or for the independent hearing officer to compromise. And what's he going to do? He's not going to go with the highest one. He's going to go with something lesser. But it may actually reflect what the district wanted in the first place. It also, and I'm being very candid, it also puts the district in a much better position when confronting a teacher to move them out without actually having to go through the process, because they know what they faced. But I don't think that this is the sort of thing that we want to have as a standard. When you have judges that have to put down a particular prescribed punishment for an offense, sometimes it doesn't really do justice and isn't fair to the individual. The other thing that they talked about here was that it would ensure fairness and uniformity within the district. First of all, I don't think there's any basis for making that particular statement. But more importantly to me, it would be important that there be some sort of dependable standard that went from district to district, so that if a teacher or other professional was guilty of committing a particular offense or doing a particular thing, that they wouldn't be dismissed in one district and get essentially a slap on the wrist in another one for essentially the same thing. The hearing officer is in a unique position to be more familiar with that, whether there's consistency in what hearings had resulted in than perhaps school officials, although we do rely heavily on legal counsel, and they certainly should have an awareness. So I have a reservation with that. Let's see. Okay. Skip all the way to 12. NYSBA supports the legislation that will expand the definition of a child-safe zone in education law by adding criteria pertaining to high crime or deteriorating vacancies buildings. I did not know, and it does not say in the rationale, that what they're really asking for is an opportunity to transport kids in an area where they otherwise would not be transporting them. They're too close to the school where they would normally be walking. Doesn't apply to us. We transport everybody. But in an urban area, there may be high crime, deteriorating neighborhoods that are essentially dangerous for the kids to go through. And so they want to change the criteria for a safe school zone to include those things so that the district would then have the option of transporting them, and those things would be aidable. And that makes sense. And I had to call Al today to get clarification because I suspected that that's what was going on, but they didn't spell it out. So I support that. 15. NYSBA seeks to initiate legislation at the state level that would provide for regulations to identify proper practices and enforce sanctions for improper practices related to the participation of parents at committees of special education meetings and hearings. I think this is a resolution that goes against the trend. There was a time when the burden of proof rested upon the complainant, that is generally the parent, when there was a disagreement of the appropriateness of the program and an IEP, and the burden of proof now rests with the school district. And I don't imagine that the state legislature would be receptive to an idea that would reduce the ability of the parents to seek redress if they're not happy, or punish them if they kind of went outside the boundaries that are normally expected. And then there is also another reality. School boards don't vote, parents do. So legislators are not prone to pass laws that are going to lose them votes. Okay. Next one is 21. NYSBA opposes lowering the age of eligibility for commercial driver's licenses required to drive school buses from 21 to 18. I can't address that. I think that the board of directors, basically school boards, and people who are not involved in transportation are not in a good position to assess whether someone who is 18, as a general rule, would be a good candidate to drive a school bus, or whether it's much better to have them be 21.
Do you think this is...
So I would seek input from Al on that, see what he has to say, and whatever he has to say, that's the way I would go.
Do you think this is stemming from the same thing that plagues our district, and that is we're significantly short of bus drivers? Do you think that's what's driving this, lowering it to 18?
Well, NYSBA is in opposition to it.
They are in opposition to it. So which district proposed this?
It's 21's Proposition 21.
This is from the School Board Association submitted it. Not a school district. If a school district were to submit it, it would have been
I see
opposite
what
way.
you mean.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
22, resolve that NYSBA support legislation to allow retired law enforcement officers to work in public schools as security officers, directors of security, supervisors of security, without affecting their pension and without a waiver. Under public employee regulations, there are caps on the amount of money that you can make per year and still retain your retirement benefits. There are waivers. Typically, interim superintendents of school get waivers, and they go in and they get a nice daily per diem. And that is done in other instances, too. This is saying without a waiver. And the Resolutions Committee objection to this particular thing was that it was essentially create another class of retirement. that was not under the same regulations and stipulations as everybody else. I think they're putting their emphasis in the wrong place. I think that our need, in schools, need for highly qualified, experienced people who have the judgment necessary in a very volatile situation where lives are at stake. It's incumbent on us to hire the best people we can. And if it means that these people will be the exception to the rule, so be it. So, and the last one was 26. NYSBA supports legislation that prevents the accumulation of exorbitant costs to schools associated with impartial hearing, independent evaluations, compensation, compensatory damages, and attorney's fees associated with formal due process complaints. And first, the biggest thing is, what the heck is an exorbitant cost? That's a very subjective term. And if that popped out at me before I even read the rationale on this, the resolution committee said basically the same thing. How do you determine what's exorbitant? So it renders the language basically useless. But then there's a matter of principle as far as I'm concerned. Anything that reduces the legal principle of due process, regardless of whether it's cost or inconvenience and so forth, and you want to set it aside because of the fact it's going to cost you some money, that's the wrong way to go. We need to protect our democracy, and we need to protect every individual within it, and honor, regardless of cost, that fundamental principle. So I'm against the idea in principle. So that basically is it.
Good job, Gary.
You did a lot of work on that, so
Yeah,
thank you.
good job.
I also want to say thank you to Gary. We've got 700 school districts in the state of New York, and I don't think all of them, or the majority of them, go through this level of rigor in going through this book. And I guess the importance of why we want to do this is, if you remember last month at our public hearing, we had several parents very concerned about the kind of the ramrod approach taken by immunizations. And that's an example of people at the legislative level not talking about it, not advocating, not thinking about how a change in a law is going to impact people's lives. And so we've got you at the NYSBA convention representing our thoughts. This is a chance for us, prior to that, to present any further concerns to Gary, to make sure that we do air these things out. And I think I'm very proud of the fact that we do it right in this district by having you look at it, provide the comments, provide your insight, and give us a chance to talk about it in public if needed. So thank you very much.
Good job, Gary.
So let's move on to consent items, treasurer's report. Can I have a motion on this? Mrs. Hoffman, second Mrs. Miller. Any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? Let's go to minutes, July 9th. This one, I don't know if we have a quorum because we had...
Gary, Todd,
Okay.
yeah, we have 4.
We have 4 here. Okay, but we'll have 4. Okay, we can do this one. This is good, taken care of tonight. Thank you very much. Can I have a motion on this one? Mr. Gilbert, Mrs. Stevenson, any comments, questions? All in favor? So 4 voted on this one, 4 out of 4. Next one is August
We have
13th.
abstention from 2.
Yeah,
Okay.
August 13th, I think we're in good shape on this one. Can I have a motion on August 13th minutes? Mrs. Miller, Mrs. Hoffman, any comments, questions?
I'll abstain from this one.
Abstention from Mr. Gilbert. All in favor? So we have 5 on that one. August 27th, can I have a motion on this one? Mrs. Miller, Mr. Gilbert, any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? Okay, we're up to the action items. Go ahead.
I'm a little slow off the gun.
Okay. A lot of these are separate and distinct, but we'll try to attempt to combine 3 and 4. So let's go to approval of sports booster clubs. I think this is what we're going to look at, and you saw the numbers from the dashboard, but just the number of students we have touched by athletics. And these are all parents that are working with, making sure they have the best possible experience and using a lot of own internal fundraising. And obviously, we want to manage that where appropriate, but just look at the number of students impacted by this one. Can I have a motion on this one? Mrs. Hoffman, Mrs. Miller, any comments, questions?
I'm jumping off here, I'm going to digress for a second. Just on the Shen logo, this just reminds me of that. So I know, Kelly, you do a great job on trying to keep control of this, but, you know, more and more, just crazy things happen around the district that we see Shen pop up everywhere. So, having said that, I want to bring up a question. If a booster club is using a certain place and a certain venue to get their wear from, say, and then another venue also puts out the same, is that an agreement or is that in conflict?
Once they have the agreement, they can use any of the logos they want, but that money has to go to that booster club. The 8% royalty.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? If not, all in favor? Let's go to a contract with KeyBank. Any, can I have a motion on this one? Mr. Gilbert, Mr. DeLallo, second. Any comments, questions? If not,
Just a quick question.
Go ahead.
So who has these cards? So it was saying that we're doing this new contract because it was harder, I mean, some of the reasons were it's harder to track. But, so what happened to the original cards? I guess I was a little confused.
So these new cards basically replace the cards that we have. And the reason we want to change is because right now, in order to go online and see what activity is there before a bill comes, we can't see it as a district. The individual person can call. So like Albert can call and find out his activity, but that doesn't help the accounts payable folks to try to manage the account balances that
Went
we
from the
have.
individual to now the school district.
Yeah, I mean,
Is that the
yeah,
difference?
it's a
Okay.
school district issued card, but
Right.
how
So
it
it
was
wasn't
structured, it
before?
was issued on an individual basis
Ah,
versus
okay.
on an
It's
organizational basis.
considered part of a business account,
Okay.
whereas the others were considered something different apparently.
and this is the right way to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
All in favor on action item number 2? Okay, all in favor? Good, thank you. We'll combine 3 and 4. One is a contract for school psychology training support program. The second is a contract for special education prompt therapy. Can I have a motion on this one? Mr. DeLallo, second, Mrs. Miller. Any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? Number 5 is disposal of buses. Can I have a motion on this one? Mrs. Miller, second, Mr. Gilbert. Any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? Number 6 is reserve transfers. We talked about it last month. Can I have a motion on this one? Mr. Gilbert, second. Mrs. Stevenson, any comments, questions? All in favor? And number 7, scholarships and local grant donations. Can I have a motion on this one? Mrs. Stevenson, second. Mrs. Miller, any comments, questions?
What is a Miley Caroli scholarship? What is that? Because there were 2 small amounts. What is it for?
these,
Scano.
Is it like, I mean, because they were odd amounts, I just didn't know what that was. It looks like some.
this is scholarship in name of a person,
Okay,
a former Scandal
a former
person. Yeah.
student?
No, I think this one is, I have to check, but I'm not sure if it's a student of passive adult polio.
Okay. She was an administrator.
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and one for each of those grade levels.
So with gratitude.
With gratitude. All in favor? With gratitude, okay. Let's go to final one, contracted services, professional development. Can I have a motion on this one? Mr. DeLallo, second, Mrs. Miller. Comments, questions? If not, all in favor? Okay, let's move over to special education, and this is my line.
Good evening. I have
evening.
recommendations for you tonight from the Committees on Preschool and School-Age Education.
Okay, can I have a motion on this one? Mr. Gilbert, Mrs. Miller, any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? And then Mrs. Bush for approval of staffing recommendations.
Yes, we have 2 new teachers that I'm recommending tonight. A Spanish teacher, Trini Hernandez. I don't believe she's here. And Katie Quack for a functional skills development class. So we have 2 new teachers we're recommending. And 2 retirements, especially of note, Andrew Bono has worked in CODA, and he's been a cleaner for 39 years. So he is retiring in October. And Mr. Ed Peabody, he's a monitor at High School East, and he's been with us for 15 years. So lots of longevity.
Any comments, questions? Can I have a motion on this one? Mr. Gilbert, second, Mrs. Hoffman. All in favor? All right. We now have time for additional public comments. Is there anybody out there who would like to bring them forward? If not, let's go to number 9, policy review. As I mentioned, we'll do policy tomorrow in the morning. And that will start the cycle of bringing first and second readings and on a monthly basis. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Hoffman, second, Mrs. Stevenson. All in favor? All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.